Welcome, everyone. Tonight we have Communicating in Today's World with Rhonda Travers. So, Rhonda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, very good. Good evening, everybody. And I am trying now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second because it's giving me some type of error message here. And I'll start sharing again. So good evening. And I'm actually curious to see where everyone is dialing in from. So since we have a great small group there, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're dialing in from, and don't be shy. You can go ahead and turn on your video. Would love to see some faces as we continue through this evening. But I'm actually dialing in from St. Louis. So I'm going to go ahead and resume sharing my screen so that we can get started. And this is a timely topic. We're going to be talking about communicating in today's world. And with that, it comes with a lot of change over the past 20 months. But the interesting thing is with what has changed over the past 20 months, the critical components of communication has pretty much stayed the same. It's just there's some additional things to think about in today's environment that perhaps compounds the importance of effective communication. So over the next hour, we're going to be talking about three main things. And let me try and hide this here. We're going to be talking about understanding today's environment and going back to the basics on what the critical elements of writing effective emails would be. And then lastly, identifying ways to navigate through conversations and group dynamics now that we have this extra component of virtual within our environment. So to get started, I wanted to share a little bit about my background. I have 30 years of internal audit, risk and compliance experience, and I've been able to work with different business leaders on helping them understand internal controls and where their risks might be in their business. And with 21 of those years, I've had leadership roles where I've had the opportunity to work with individuals and train and coach and develop employees, as well as coaching teams of members within each department that I've worked in. And during that time, I really enjoyed the HR process. So for 17 of those years, I worked and collaborated with our HR professionals within each of those organizations to really understand the employee cycle and the experience and where the risks are and the trends are with that, so that we can make sure that our audit procedures really reflected where the risks were for the HR process. And lastly, about 15 years, I've been involved with volunteer management with various roles within my community, predominantly with the American Cancer Society, and working with committees for Relay for Life in training and coaching and developing them for the Eastern Missouri Territory, as well as help plan the Relay for Life event that occurred in St. Louis. And all of these years leads up to my decision to launch my own training and consulting business and leverage the experience that I've gained over the past 30 years to really work with small businesses and nonprofits and helping them focus on their people behind the process and helping them identify the entire employee experience from the time they recruit someone to the time that they terminate someone, and where there could be opportunities to improve their processes as well as improve and enhance their employee experience and development, engagement, and retention. So I work by doing presentations like this, as well as providing advisory services and training workshops. So with that, I'm sorry, I'm having a little, my mouse is sticking here, and that is just part of today's environment, isn't it, with the virtual. I wanted to get a little background about what your environment is. So if you are a college student, if you want to answer this as far as how many colleagues that you work with in your chapter. And if you're a professional, if you want to indicate within your organization, how many employees you have within your organization, that will just give me a little bit of background about you. And it looks like from the polling questions here, most of you are working with about 21 to 200 colleagues. I'll give it just another second or two for everyone to finish their poll. Looks like we have 7 responding. Very good. And let's see. Does everyone see those results on the screen? That about 71% work for an organization and that has 21 to 200 employees. Okay. And the next question is, as we've all have experienced, what is the current status of your work environment? Have you, are you still working remotely and everybody? Or are all of your employees and colleagues back in the office? Or lastly, do you have a hybrid situation where maybe some are still working from home while others are still working in the office? I'll just give that a couple more seconds for everyone to finish that poll. I know at the time that I had transitioned out of corporate this year, my entire team of approximately 200 employees, we were all still working from home. And I believe that's still going to be the case for the next several months. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And it looks like that either it's kind of split with everybody, is either we have about 43% of you are all employees are back in the office, about 30% is hybrid. And then we have other. If you wouldn't mind indicating in the chat, has anyone indicated what that other environment might entail?
Not yet, but they may be typing right now.
Okay. But the reality of it in this past 20 months and what everyone has endured is we are working on a hybrid environment, and that remote working is here to stay. So even if you were in an environment before where you were used to seeing your colleagues face to face, you know, there's going to be some type of remote and virtual component to your communication from this point forward. With all the research I've performed in webinars and even listening to some of the St. Louis leaders, since I am coming from St. Louis, the hybrid approach is here to stay, and having remote options for certain work environments is truly here to stay. So being able to adapt to this new environment is so critical to whatever type of work or college experience that you have right now.
So we've had 2 comments so far. So Gail chose to retire rather than return to work. Gail, I don't blame you at all. So I think she was one of the others. And then Christine says she's not working. She's working on her education. Then Gail just said, we were remote. Last I heard, the return to office was delayed due to vaccination rates. So,
I see.
And I know with our office, it's kind of a mixed thing. Like, you can come to the office if you want. So there are some people who are working kind of full time from the office, but then there are some who just kind of go in, you know, once a week.
Right.
I don't know if that's a hybrid or other.
Yeah, and like in my prior environment, before the pandemic, we were allowed as needed to work from home once a week if you really had to, but it was something that wasn't really a popular thing to do. And so, having to shift completely back in March of 2020 to 100% working remotely was a huge mindset shift. And being able to, going from just seeing your colleagues every single day to now working in an isolated environment, definitely was something that we all had to adjust to. So it's just definitely something that's going to be continue to be ongoing and something to consider as you continue to communicate with others. All right. So that leads into our first piece, is just understanding what is our environment today. And I don't know about you, but for me, prior to March of 2020, I had no idea what Zoom was. I didn't even use FaceTime, I hate to admit. And now look at all the things that we have done and learned over these past 20 months, where I'm sure you've heard the term Zoom fatigue. So put a raise of hands into the chat or on your screen if you attend more than 3 meetings a day on some type of virtual platform, be it Zoom, Teams, WebEx, you name it. Do you have at least 3 meetings a day where you have to be on? Also, have you show a raise of hands if you haven't really seen your colleagues since the pandemic started? Maybe you do a virtual call, but like tonight, many choose not to show on video. And so you've got that faceless little icon going on there where you don't even get to see your colleagues. And that was the type of environment that I came from, is because we were not a client-facing department. We did not have video platforms to work remotely after we all went home with the pandemic. And so all of my meetings every day, nonstop, were on the phone. So I never saw anybody that I worked with after we were sent home, because we just didn't have the capacity to do that, because working for a very large company, they did not have the bandwidth to allow 300,000 employees to work from home and also have a virtual platform for all of our meetings. So I'm sure that you probably have a similar situation. Or lastly, like we've been talking about a third of you are in a hybrid situation where you have some working from home, some now in the office, and now you're trying to conduct a meeting concurrently with all types of communication channels happening at once. Who has logistical nightmares, technical nightmares of trying to have a meeting run while you're managing all of that? Any show of hands for that? Anybody showing anything in the chat?
No, not right. No.
Okay.
No, so Gail said, I used to be on Teams and Zoom 7 to 9 hours a day, work Monday through Friday. Oh my goodness. And church services and adult education moved to Zoom. And of course, Delta Sig Brothers added Zooms to provide outlets for communication and commiseration. So it sounds like Gail was definitely on virtual meetings a lot.
Yeah, and that can create a lot of fatigue, even in an isolated situation. And that comes to the next piece, is what types of challenges are coming from a remote work from home environment, a virtual environment, both professionally as well as what you're doing personally with your nonprofits and your community services, everything that you're doing now in this either all virtual platform or this hybrid platform. So what that meant when we first had to transition completely remotely is more meetings. Like Gail said, you packed in more meetings. And it was because there was a convenience factor. I don't know about you, but working from home meant that saved me an hour and a half a day of commute time that I did not have to sit in traffic. Yay. But that means longer hours because the mindset might be, oh, well, I'm not traveling anymore for my job. I'm here now down the hallway in my own home. I don't have far to go. I'll just keep working a little bit longer. Who all has done that? Who all, by a show of hands or in the chat, say, you know what? I don't have to drive, so I'm just going to keep working. Or, having that boundary with that home convenience of, your laptop's just sitting there and maybe you've had dinner and thinking, oh, I'll just check those emails or I'll just shoot off that quick email because, I'm here, the laptop's there. So it's basically providing, the challenge is providing those boundaries within your space, so that you're not constantly working or thinking about work. Or on the flip side, on that loss of visibility, if you are sending emails because it's quick, it's easy, it's convenient, then the recipient of that email, especially if you're a manager and you're sending that to an employee and they get a message from you at 9:00 at night, that might send a message of, oh, well, maybe I should be working too at 9:00 at night and checking my emails. And they might not think that I'm working effectively because they can't see me anymore on a daily basis. So I'm going to go ahead and respond as soon as possible to that email. So that leads into the challenge of loss of visibility, where there might be the perception on a manager side of who is used to seeing their employees or working with colleagues or volunteers every day face to face, and now they're moved to an environment where they don't have that daily, that there might be that misunderstanding or mindset of, well, are they really working? Are they doing laundry? Or are they taking a walk or walking their dog? There could be all these different, little misperceptions there. And then on the employee side, they might be overcompensating because they get that vibe from their manager. Oh, that my manager doesn't really trust what I'm doing. They're micromanaging me. And so I really, really need to show and overcompensate that I really am working. And so that's going to lead into a vicious cycle of burnout in that type of environment as we continue to have the reality of virtual and remote working. And so there are solutions for that, which focuses on empathy, engagement, and efficiency. And I wanted to work through each one of those with you this evening. The first is empathy. And you might have heard of Kevin Blanchard's book, Servant Leadership. And part of servant leadership mindset is to be authentic. Because did you know that with the studies that have happened over this past year, 7 out of 10 employees are just surviving and not thriving to get through the day? And it's because we all have had to deal with extra challenges associated with these past 20 months in some capacity. And so as you are working with others and communicating with others, to ignore that completely, like it doesn't even exist and you just got to keep focused on the work, is not being authentic. Because I'm sure if you're in a managerial role and you're working with others and you're leading teams, if you aren't authentic and realize, well, I'm having technical difficulties. Gosh, my pet just made a surprise appearance in one of my team meetings. How embarrassing was that? Or, gosh, I have to help, teach my kids, because the schools were shut down at first. If you're not acknowledging some of the challenges that you're going through and being transparent with who you're communicating with and working with and being that authentic servant leader, then that's really going to impact your effectiveness of communication, because we're all experiencing some type of challenge with all this adjustment over these past 20 months. And so being authentic and having empathy of what's going on, in addition to trying to get our mission accomplished, be it at school, be it at work, be it with our community involvements, we were having this additional layer of challenge added on to everything else. So keep that in mind. Also, acknowledging when that's happening. And so Kevin Blanchard has a great book on that. Also, Stephen M. R. Covey has a book on the speed of trust. And trust also builds relationships. And having that authenticity helps with the trust, which then in turn is going to help with your overall communication. The second component is engagement. And there was a Gallup Global survey take place in 2021, and employee engagement is only at 20% and costs 8.1 trillion with a T worldwide to organizations on the impact of disengagement. Because when we have employees that are disengaged, or with working with organizations like, Delta Sig, where you've got volunteers and you're relying on volunteers to fulfill your mission, when you have disengaged individuals, you're going to have a harder time communicating and getting your overall mission accomplished. And going back to one of the challenges of our current environment is that micromanaging, that trust factor, because we're not visible anymore when we work remotely, and we're not seeing everybody as much as we're used to seeing everybody. And so if you're not empowering others to own their task and to be able to run with it, and micromanaging, that's going to impact how effectively you're communicating with others. So take a step back and say, how can I engage who I'm communicating with? Are they empowered to own their task? Have I set clear expectations and milestones and let them run with it? And making sure that you're, engaging and interacting with them throughout the way, but let them run with it. Which then leads to that second bullet of, do they have the tools? Do they know what they need to do in order to complete that task? How do you onboard? Do you have a training program for either your volunteers or your employees so they know their role and how that fits with your overall organization and how that fits with the milestone and the initiative that you have underway that needs to be achieved? Because the more tools you provide and the more empowerment you provide, the more effective you're going to be able to collaborate with others and communicate with others. And lastly, to help with engagement is that exciting environment. So with remote working, many people are sitting in a room in their house by themselves, limited human interaction. Now, a lot of it has changed now, but we've come a long way over these 20 months. And if we just constantly just focus on the end product and work only without any type of exciting environment, or just acknowledging what's going on in the world and going back to that authentic self, that impacts engagement. So be sure that you're promoting an exciting environment. A couple of things that teams have done and businesses have done to kind of get through this transitional period is, on Fridays, instead of having a business meeting, they carved out 15 minutes and had a virtual coffee together because, maybe they would have gone to coffee, in their office, if they were in person, and now they can't. So to make it exciting and fun, they went ahead and scheduled a coffee, virtually so that they can talk and not talk about business. Business is for a very important purpose, but just carve out some time where you're not talking business. My team, we had trivia. So every Friday afternoon, someone sent out a trivia question and then compared all the answers, and we found out on Monday who won the trivia contest. something different to release the stress and the challenges that we're all enduring during this transitional time of dealing with all these new challenges that we didn't have to deal with 20 months ago. It's going back to being real and being authentic and really being empathetic to what's going on. And on the flip side, when you're dealing with volunteers, keep in mind that your volunteers are choosing to spend time, their personal time, with competing priorities with your organization and your mission of what you're trying to achieve. And more than likely, like someone just mentioned in the chat, they've been in meetings all day. So having another member volunteer meeting that's just as boring as meetings that they've endured all day, that might impact their engagement with your organization as a volunteer. So promote an exciting environment with your volunteers as well. Maybe have a member spotlight or celebrate birthdays. Celebrate a milestone that you're achieving as an organization. Make it fun. Play some music. We all have our business objectives we need to achieve when we all get together in a meeting. But if you can find different creative ways to increase that engagement, that's going to help with the overall morale of who you're working with, in addition to how your communication is being received. And that's just going to just overall impact your operations so positively as a whole. I can go on and about engagement, but I'm going to get back to communication at hand. So the last piece is efficiency. So we have a lot of other ways to communicate now that maybe we didn't consider back in 2019. So in the chat, if you can identify which communication channel do you use most right now to communicate with, either if you're in school, another colleague in an organization that you're working in, if you're a professional, what company you're working with, what is what you use the most? Do you use Skype or instant messaging the most? Is it virtual? Do you have a lot of virtual meetings, or just a phone call like I had? Email or other? I'll give everyone some time to put that in the chat.
So while people are typing, Amy said that during a weekly meeting that she attends at the beginning, they play a fun YouTube music video, some retro music. So that sounds like fun. Amy said Teams, don't do cell phone because you might catch them eating lunch. Jacob said A and B, so Skype, instant messaging, and then virtual meetings. Kenneth says at Christian Brothers University, my classes use Cisco WebEx, so virtual.
Well, very good. Well, I'm sure that everyone has used all of these channels of communication at some point these past 20 months. And I just want to talk about some efficiencies to think about with each one. So let's first start with Skype, instant messaging, and I say text as well. So that type of channel is really great for quick questions or acknowledgements. Going back to engagement, it's nice. I always enjoy getting an instant message from, a colleague of mine of, how's the day going, or a funny little quote, or, something quick. Or as I was working with my team, if I had just a quick question about something, I would use the IM, and that's helpful because once again, if you are still in a hybrid where you are working with others who are working remotely, they could not, they could be sitting in their house all by themselves, having that feeling of isolation. So getting something, quick in an IM is something nice to break up the day and increase engagement. So you just don't feel like you're cranking through, without any kind of interaction of some sort with others as you are working throughout your day. So it's really great, for those quick pieces of acknowledgement. Hey, kudos on this, or, did you hear from so and so? But when you start getting instant messages, and who has, where maybe someone asks you a question, so you have to stop what you're doing, you have to type the answer, and then about 5 minutes later, you get another question from the same person, you have to stop what you're doing, and you have to type another answer. Who's done that? Who's received that before? It becomes very inefficient. So being able to identify, if you're not getting the information you need, or if all of a sudden now some of your questions are turning into longer requests, kind of putting a stop on the instant messaging and maybe going to a meeting of some sort, either on the phone or virtually, or summarizing in an email, because that stops your time and your momentum of whatever you're working on by constantly having to type in an IM, and then you're also interrupting that other person if you're continually having to do that. So something to consider about with that. And then with phone calls, it's definitely great to pick up the phone and just call someone if perhaps your question's not being answered, because if we're typing quickly, we're multitasking and we're getting all tech savvy here as we work remotely. As we do things very quickly, things might be misunderstood. And so that's perhaps another reason why you're not getting the answers you're looking for when you're trying to do things like that, because we're typing so quickly and people are reading it quickly and they want to just move on to the next thing, and you're not communicating on the same page. So sometimes it's great just to pick up the phone and call, or say, hey, are you available at 9 o'clock? Can I give you a quick call? That also then goes back to engagement, because once again, you're talking to a human being and you're not just cranking things through on your computer by yourself in a room, in a hallway, away from other people. So, it helps with the engagement of others as just to talk on the phone. And the other two pieces with virtual and email, we're going to get back in a minute. Were there any others in the chat? Did anyone indicate other on E?
So Christine did, but she didn't say what it was.
Okay. Okay.
But Gail did comment, couple comments. She said they had a water cooler channel on Teams and someone could post fun topics to talk about in there. And then she also said that we would set team members we would have team members set up team chats to become the equivalent of a cube drop-in, encouraging opening up the voice capability and talking rather than typing. I added what touch points do you need questions in the daily stand up, which was a signal to team members to set up touch points collaboration time. And then Christine answered, she said other social media sites.
Gotcha. Great. So moving on to other communication challenges, we have another poll question, and that is, what is the biggest communication challenge in your current environment, either in your college environment or if you're a professional in your work environment? Do you find that you send an email out and it's delayed, or maybe you don't get answer it at all? Or do you find that you get back and forth? Maybe you're sending emails and texts back and forth and you're just not getting the desired action that you're looking for or answers. Or possibly, do you have lack of participation in meetings, either virtually or in person, where you're finding that it's crickets when you ask a question, or you're asking for volunteers, or you're asking for input, things like that. Just wanted to get an idea of where everyone stands with their biggest communication challenge. And it looks like most everyone has answered, and 70% say that they experienced delayed responses to their emails, while 20% indicate that they experience a lot of back and forth texts or emails without getting that desired action that they're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll there. And I'm not sure when I say share results if you're seeing anything or not. Heather, is that seen?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, very good. So that leads to our second piece of this evening, and that is getting back to the basics of an effective email, because that is part of how we need to communicate with others. And the three things to think about is keeping them concise, clear, and courteous. So we'll break down each one. So concise emails, it just starts with, what is the subject line? Do you have enough information in the subject line so that in this digital world where we are inundated, our inbox is blowing up with so many different pieces. We have so many different digital social media components to look at in our daily lives. Do you have enough information in that email so that someone knows what it's all about, if it's urgent or not, or if it's just, a secondary email? And then in that first paragraph, or at least in the first sentence, is it clearly stated what you're looking for? You don't want someone to have to read down to paragraph number 5 to know, oh, they need 5 documents from me by Friday. If they have to read all the way down, more than likely, as busy as everyone is, and as packed in with meetings everyone experiences right now, given the convenience of virtual world, if someone opens up an email that's 5 paragraphs long, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to close it, and they're going to say, I will get to that later today. I don't have time for this now. So the more that you can state in that first sentence or a couple of first sentences is going to have a better reaction and a better response to your email. So perhaps it is that you've got 5 questions you want to ask them. Go ahead and say, hello, my name is, I'm working on this for this project, and I have the following 5 questions for you. Boom. You've stated what the action is. They don't have to go very far. With my audit background, we had to do that a lot, especially not necessarily with the entity that we were auditing, because they knew we were there asking questions, but sometimes we had to involve our business partners, someone from risk, someone from compliance, or someone from legal. So they might not have even known that there was an audit going on. So it was very important for my team to say, hello, I'm so-and-so from audit. We are working on this audit. I'm involving you because of X, and I have, the following questions that we need your assistance on. So it's concise. It's identifying what the action is, what do we need from them, and why they're involved with that email. And if you have multiple questions, or perhaps you need multiple pieces of information from them, numbering them and bulleting them is going to be helpful than trying to put everything in block form and paragraphs. And I have always been less is more. So the less words we can use and the more concise we can be, the more readable it's going to be to your audience, and the more likelihood is going to be that you're going to have a response that's timely and just have a response. So I say get rid of those extra words and those smothered verbs. And what that means is, if you take a look at that first bullet, I would like to take this opportunity to. That's 8 words. That takes up a lot of space. And if people are reading on devices now, you're not going to have a lot of time or energy or patience to try and keep scrolling down on your device to read a lengthy email. You can get rid of all of those words to say, I have the following questions, or, I would like to take this opportunity to ask you a question, that you just get right to, I have some questions, or, someone forwarded your name to me because of X or Y, just getting right to the point. Or permit me to say, that's another fun one, where you're already writing the email, or you're already going to call somebody, so you're already saying something. You don't need those words at all. Strike those out completely. I am led to believe. What would be another way to say I am led to believe? That's 5 words. How can we get it down to 2 words? Anyone want to take a chance on that? You can either unmute yourself, or you can put that in the chat.
I understand.
Yes, I understand. 2 words. We go from 5 words to 2 words. That's great. The next one I love, and coming from an audit background, it was noted that. Oh, that's used quite a lot in the audit world. It was noted that. You don't even need that. We observed, but it was noted that. Number 1, it's very impersonal. And 2, that's 4 words. Smothered verbs. Those last 2 bullets are smothered verbs. Come to a conclusion. What would be a way to get rid of, 4 words and get it down to 2 words for that smothered verb? You can take yourself off of mute.
Therefore?
Yeah, therefore. Or we conclude instead of come to a conclusion. And same thing with complete an analysis. Well, the verb is analyzed. We analyzed instead of we completed an analysis. You don't need all those words to describe the verb. You can just say we analyzed, and then you only have 1 word. So those are some things to kind of, once again, keep it concise, especially as we are working on devices now. It's going to take up less space, and it'll get to the point. So the next piece is, in addition to concise, is making it clear. I mentioned before, with concise is being very direct as far as what your requested action is, and being very clear with that. I have the following 5 questions, or I'd like to schedule a meeting for you to cover the following. Being very clear with what you need in those first few sentences, but then also including a target date for action. This is something I've worked with my teams on a lot. Coming from the audit world, we need a lot of questions answered, and we need a lot of documents to be received so that we can complete our audit, and meet deadlines. But a lot of my team members, forget to put that important piece in there. Please complete the following questions by Friday the 15th. They forget to put that target action in there. So if your audience doesn't understand, your timeline, they're going to put it off for when they have time. So, and being, clear about this is going to help us achieve our deadline, or this is going to help us meet our audit requirements, something so that they help them understand, I'm not just trying to make your life miserable for you, but, this is the timeline that we have. So always make sure that you have some type of target date for whatever action you're asking for in the email. And then this is my favorite. How many of you have received emails where they're chains? So you were added somehow, some way, for some reason at the end, and you have to go down many email chains to figure out what the original question was, and then what they need from you. So that just makes me laugh all the time. So make sure that it's clear to your audience. You're adding them because of X project. You just need this from them, and they can refer to the email chain to see all parties involved, or the background of what's being requested, or what that action item entails. But summarize it a little bit and be clear about upfront, what do you need from them, so they don't have to go filtering through the emails, because that might delay the response and the effectiveness of the response to you. And then lastly, avoid acronyms or abbreviations, especially if you're working with volunteers, they might not know your environment. Just make sure that things are clear to your audience there. And that leads into the final piece of, being courteous and making sure that you've got the right audience. And it's okay to say, your name was forwarded to me. If you can't answer this question, please let me know who can. Or perhaps you're scheduling a meeting and you're not sure if you have all the right audience. Say, please forward this to the appropriate parties. It's okay to do that. You want to make sure you're mindful of everyone's time, since we all have competing priorities. And, this is an email. It's not a text. It's not a text to your friends. It's a professional email. So, avoid using all caps or emojis to get your point across. You want to make sure it's professional. And, kind of watch the frequency that, if you're finding that you're sending a lot of emails around, throughout a day, try to accumulate and just send one out a day, or maybe, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, so that people don't have to filter through multiple emails from you. And using that judgment again, if you're finding that maybe you send an email, you get a response, it's not quite what you're looking for, and you need to send a follow-up email, make sure you kind of cut the line and identify, what, maybe I need to pick up the phone and call and clear that up so that we can just knock this out, or schedule a meeting. And when you do schedule a meeting, make sure that if you have an agenda, that's provided to them at least 24 hours in advance. That helps, because if you are looking for your members to participate in a meeting where perhaps you're brainstorming a new idea, or you need a status update of what's going on with an initiative that you're working on, the more that they can come prepared to that meeting and know that that's what's going to be covered, the more efficient that meeting is going to become, especially if you're relying on someone to provide a status update. If they don't have the opportunity to see that that's expected, and they don't get that agenda until an hour before that meeting, you might not have the most effective meeting, which then leads to ineffective communication. So keep that in mind. And then, who has heard of the term tragedy language? That means if you are starting off with more of a negative approach to your email, it's saying unfortunately, or I cannot, or Susie failed to send this to me, so I'm sending this to you. It's a lot of negative components to an email that might not set the right tone for getting the information that you need from that email back from your audience. So try and turn things into positive. If you're needing something in a hurry, be mindful of your audience. Say, you know what, I really appreciate your time on this. I appreciate your quick turnaround. And so saying, unfortunately, I need this, and blah, blah, blah. So, kind of try and turn those pieces around and not point fingers. If someone dropped the ball on something, we don't need to kind of point that out in an email to somebody else. Just try and work through with what you have. And that leads to the last piece, and that is managing conversations in a group setting or a one-on-one setting that is verbal, like on the phone, or in a virtual or in-person meeting. And the key term here to think about is making it collaborative. And there's three different items to consider with making a conversation collaborative. One is understanding a common ground between your audience that you are talking to. So say perhaps you have a solution or a proposal that you're really needing a solution for, and you're trying to communicate that to an accounting person or a lawyer or an executive. Keep those pieces in mind of what their perspectives are, because what you think is a priority to get your job done may not be a priority to them. So if you're talking to someone in finance about something that you're proposing, put the cost in there, do the homework on this is going to cost X amount, and we've already done an analysis on this. having some information to help them understand from their perspective what their concern is going to be. If you're speaking to management or leadership, help them understand how this aligns with the mission. How is this going to improve their organization? So knowing your audience and who's participating in that conversation. Also keep an open mind. If you are anticipating pushback, make sure you come in with an open mind of listening to what they have to say, because everyone wants to be heard. They want to have the ability to be heard and make an impact and understand what they're doing aligns with the overall goal of the organization or a mission within the organization. And so if you're talking and trying to get them to understand your perspective without listening to them, then that's going to impact the effectiveness of your communication. So making sure you're listening. And who all's done this where you're just so excited about what you're saying, you realize you're not speaking, but then when you do take a breath and they start talking, you're just focusing on what you're saying next. So you're not really hearing what they have to say. So making sure that you're pausing and you're restating what they're saying. So if you're expecting some pushback, you can rephrase it. So what I'm hearing is, or help me understand where you have this concern. Once again, it's finding a common ground to make it collaborative, but it's asking to be heard and listening, and then asking good follow-up questions that encourages conversation. And then that last piece is building rapport. Are you only reaching out to someone when you need something from them, or are you creating that rapport with them so that they can get to know you a little bit, so by the time you do need something from them, you have that rapport. They understand where you're coming from and who you are, and you understand them and where they're coming from. When I was in audit, I did this a lot because I really wanted to make sure that our audit programs reflected the risks of that particular area. And instead of just coming to them when I'm auditing them, which doesn't really establish a good rapport, I met quarterly with different business leaders so that I can understand their area, what trends are happening, what challenges they're facing, so I could really hear, and they can get to know me and I can get to know them, so that the next time we needed to collaborate, it would be so much more effective than just coming business only at the time that I need them, and that's it. So really try and engage. And it goes back to how to engage others, and reaching out to someone periodically to understand, so you can have that conversation. Which then leads to my very last point is that in every group, you're going to have dynamics, and there's 4 different kinds of participants, and it can either be virtual or live, in person or virtual. You might have someone who's silent, who doesn't speak up at all. And so it's important to just emphasize throughout the meeting that you're wanting to hear from everybody, that you're wanting all different types of perspectives, and that you're looking forward to hearing from everybody. And if you realize that someone maybe is very silent, instead of calling them out, make sure that you maybe reach out to them afterwards offline. You might also have someone who's monopolizing, who's has experienced that before, where they take up the entire meeting. They really have something to say, but there's not a lot of time to encourage other perspectives. It's good to recognize their contributions. Maybe they work from home or they have no one else to talk to, so they're just excited to be talking. And you want to make sure that you're coming from their perspective of, thank you, I've written this down, so they know that they've been heard, but that you're encouraging that you want to hear from other perspectives as well. Which leads in also to sidetrackers, who maybe they totally get off of your agenda, completely off of a side issue, and then now you're running out of time to talk about what's on the agenda. Once again, they want to be heard. So say, you know what, we have a parking lot. Those are great concepts for another meeting. I'm writing them down, especially if you're virtual. Let them know you're writing them down if they can't see you. and, acknowledge their contributions, but that, we're going to, listen to other perspectives of the agenda at hand. And then lastly, with side conversationalists, if you're in person, that means they're talking to other people. And so that means they're not really hearing what you have to say. And then multitaskers, if you're virtual, where, if their video is off, you have no idea what they're doing behind the scenes, multitasking, if they're even hearing half of what you're saying. So it's kind of the same kind of concept, is being able to address that. So if you're live and you're talking and you notice that there's a side conversation going on, once again, don't call them out. But if you can kind of walk over while you're talking, that kind of maybe curbs the conversation. Or you can encourage and ask a question and then, have some silence and wait for someone to answer. That kind of spurs, oh gosh, someone just asked a question and no one's talking. So that kind of curbs the conversation as well. And if you have multitaskers on a virtual call, engaging throughout your meeting by asking for a show of hands, doing polling questions, asking people to unmute themselves, that's going to encourage engagement and maybe minimize what's going on behind the scenes, behind the video. So with that, I know we are right up at time, so I want to be mindful of that. So I really appreciate your time this evening to talk about communication. I can't open it up for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I do have my contact information here. Would love to continue the conversation with you of any way I can help you and your organization through training. Definitely let me know and we can definitely schedule a call. So with that, thank you, Heather.
Thank you. That was a lot of good information. So if anybody has any questions, I think we can take those.